This is the Secure Cyber Connect podcast with Jay Adamson and Warren Atkinson, where we're joined by information cybersecurity, technology and talent acquisition professionals who share their journeys, unique perspectives and offer advice and guidance.
Our topics on this episode will be cybersecurity careers and development. Today we're delighted to be joined by Alexandra Forsyth. Alexandra is widely recognised for her extensive experience in the cybersecurity industry, where she engages in comprehensive strategic research and is currently based in London. Throughout her career to date, Alexandra has concentrated her efforts heavily on the expansive field of cyber and firmly believes that cultivating the right culture towards work is of the utmost importance and paramount to success. Having dedicated her professional life to mastering this complex domain, she's become deeply conversant with the intricate details involved in safeguarding sensitive digital information. Her remarkable journey ultimately led her to establish AFRG, AF's Retail Guide in 2024, a groundbreaking educational platform that merged her vast knowledge in retail, fashion, art and technology, and of course, cybersecurity. Alexandra's personal brand is very close to her own heart, focusing on mission-driven projects. She's passionate about building community up and offers resource through coaching and public speaking at events discussing early careers. This diverse blend of interests and expertise was recently showcased in Alexandra's engaging TEDx talk in London, where she thoughtfully delved into the crucial role of community in an increasingly connected world, underscoring the vital importance of fostering collaboration and support. Here on Cyber Connect, we couldn't agree more with that. Alexandra, welcome to the Secure Cyber Connect podcast, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you on the episode.
Lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
So if you'd like to start things off by just telling our audience very briefly what's brought you here and give us a very brief high-level overview of what we'll actually be discussing.
Yeah, so what brought me here, I think your podcast stood out to me in terms of what you're doing in the community space, bringing people together, thought leaders, talking about security. I think one thing for me is raising awareness in the security domain and just making sure that people understand what cybersecurity is from our point of view and putting out the mitigation and the recommendations as well. And what we'll be talking about today is aspects of my career in terms of threat intelligence, which is a branch of cybersecurity. We'll also talk about the community aspect and mission-driven statement, as you mentioned, what I hope to be doing in that space, but also talking about personal branding, networking, the importance of early careers and putting yourself out there from right at the beginning, not just waiting until you've had your first or second role, but just really thinking about some of the key starting points early on.
So we always kick things off by asking our guests to maybe give us something that they may be proud of, excited about, or want to shine a light on that isn't typically featured on their LinkedIn profile.
This is a really tricky question for me because I have quite a lot of information on my LinkedIn. But I think one thing I'm most proud of is just having the resilience along the way in my career so far. So I've been doing threat intelligence for 4 years and I've worked in a number of different roles in consulting, some of the biggest clients in the world, but just having the resilience to kind of not get knocked down by failure really early on from rejection and upskilling and just constantly wanting to learn more about the industry, not just going into a 9 to 5 and then you're done and you have your weekends. I very much work every day of the week and I love what I do in the cybersecurity space and I love talking to clients and making sure that they have everything that they need. So for me, it's just being proud of picking a career. And that's exactly what it is. It's not a job, it's a career, and just knowing that I can do this for life if I want, and I can pivot. And I've been doing threat intelligence such a long time. If I wanted to go and decide to do another area of cyber, I very much can. And I have it within me to understand, and I believe in myself as well. So maybe just proud of that I kept going.
In terms of your career, what might you consider to be one of the sort of key events or challenges that you came across that significantly influenced your perspective on cyber?
So for me, it's definitely a personal aspect of cyber. And I think it just goes back to not studying not going through the traditional route in order to get my career. I studied criminology at university, so I always had to work a little bit harder in order to come into cybersecurity and prove my worth in a way. And I think that was always a challenge for me right at the beginning. But also I'm very introverted, or at least I used to be very, very introverted. So when I had my first role in threat intelligence, it was a lot to do with public speaking and learning how to talk to clients. And I'd never had experience in this area. Even at university, I hadn't really done that much public speaking. So I found it quite hard, and I found it quite challenging to kind of rise to the occasion. But again, going back to what I mentioned before, having the self-belief and just working on my just working and honing on the way to deliver my key message to different clients. And so turning that challenge into more of a success along the way, and constantly working on it over the years to get to that point.
No, that's brilliant. We appreciate you sharing there, Alexandra. And yeah, what was the sort of driving why behind that for you?
Yeah, so I think the driving force for me was getting really nervous before I went into meetings. When it comes to presenting, what I try and teach now is having that key message, the delivery, the introduction, beginning, middle, and end. What do you really want to get across to the client, making that impact? And definitely for, say, leadership or CISOs, it's about looking at the trends, looking at the data, but offering solutions. It's always about the solution. But in the beginning, I used to just, because I was so nervous, I'd want to deliver all of the information, which it's good and bad because it shows that you're very knowledgeable in your area, but also at the same time, the attention span of people in the room you have to be wary of, and just understand that they only need to know the high level overview. So I think getting used to that and just getting used to my delivery and knowing that just speaking calmly, taking a breath, but that's all part of the journey really with public speaking. It turns out to be quite a daunting experience, but the more you practice, the more you get better. And now, obviously, I love talking to different audiences, from leadership to IT professionals, understanding different groups and what information they need to be fed. And as I say, it's always about the solution, always about the mitigation that you can offer out for cybersecurity. So it was definitely a challenge in the beginning, not really understanding who I was as a public speaker or just as a threat intelligence analyst. And at the same time, I was trying to understand what threat intelligence was because I didn't have the background. So it was a combination, so many different things in kind of the corporate world, which you're just learning day to day. But it's also having that willingness to do it. And as I say, going back to, it's a career, it's not a job. So investing your time in understanding more.
In terms of talking about careers within cyber, let's sort of break that down a little bit and maybe, get some suggestions from you that you may have that, for honing and cultivating talent from outside the stereotypical sectors and maybe the usual background experience.
Yeah, so as I say, my background is quite unconventional, having studied criminology at both my bachelor's and my master's level, but there were transferable skills that I could take over. It's a lot to do with critical thinking, being strategic, writing reports, and then going on to deliver presentations. I was looking at the criminal justice system, policing, probation, so why people do what they do, and having a look at possibly the psychology behind it. You can apply that to cybersecurity because we're looking at threat actors and different types of organized criminals, state-sponsored activity, hacktivists, and we're trying to focus on their motivators, their modus operandi, tactics they're using, and again, going right through to what can we offer out to clients to make sure that they're protected from different types of crime that's taking place. So there were transferable skills all along the way, but I've worked with colleagues that don't have cybersecurity or data analytics or computer science, and it's international relations, geopolitics, even right down to marketing and business. And business is so important, and it's something that I try and I have tried to learn more about when it comes to talking to different clients and organizations, because you're focusing on cybersecurity, which is one aspect, but just the business as a whole. So their data, their assets, how they run their operations. And I do a lot of industry research. So I focused on retail and fashion industries in the last few years. And I've gone to events which haven't been cybersecurity related at all. They focused on technology, so AI, point of sale e-commerce, but that's all still relevant and still valuable for me because I can look at, say, a value chain, or I can look at the supply chain of a client and actually try and pinpoint where exactly a threat actor could try and get into the network or try and steal the data. So it's important to understand that whatever your background you're coming from, there will be some skills in there that you can bring forward. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think those that are perhaps transitioning from different sectors, industries, they bring that business and industry knowledge with them. And more importantly, they bring the ability to sort of communicate effectively internally, as opposed to sort of being someone that enters the business from the outside in. I think that's where a lot of organizations seeing success, cross-training, developing, redeploying. Certainly in the US, we've seen a lot more of that. The UK certainly on a route to sort of pick things up. And I think some of the EUA Act, of course, and the increased amount of funding that the UK's government's could be putting into academia and startups and, of course, enterprise organisations. I think it was something to the tune of £14 billion over the next 5 years. So that's something that's encouraging. I hope there's going to be an increased route for individuals to break into the industry and that we can retain the talent here in the UK, because I think not a lot of people understand that some of our best and brightest actually go abroad and work. It's called the brain. We take the talent out of other regions. They come to the UK to work for a better level of living, of course, and better opportunity. But we're not naive enough to believe that the UK is the end stop for everyone.
We're going to ask a question that we obviously asked a lot of guests and spoke a lot about over recent times, which is how do we attract more women into the tech sector in general, Alexandra?
So I'm actually involved with a few women in tech networks. So some of them are virtual. There are a few women in tech organizations in London as well. And I think it's part of kind of the network mentoring scene, attracting talent is putting yourself out there. And as we're doing today, talking about careers, talking about different aspects of cyber and just getting people excited. And I think listening to others if they're facing any barriers into entering the industry, trying to offer that mentorship or coaching out. And as I say, it's just all about getting them to understand that it's not just about being technical in cyber. You can be strategic, you can have a non-technical background. There's a place for everyone in cybersecurity. I really feel that there are so many different roles. It's such a vast industry, which I don't think spoken about enough. And if I look at threat intelligence, one thing that I tell people, I collaborated with all teams in terms of security operations, incident response, threat hunting, threat management, and then the business marketing side. So it's a really collaborative approach once you get inside the industry. And I think if we relay that back more, it will attract more women. And I've been fortunate enough to work with quite an equal split of both women and men along my career in different teams. So again, relaying that back and saying it's not just male dominated, but there's a space for a lot of intelligent women to come in and have fruitful careers. So I think definitely the engagement, networking, the public speaking, relaying back what the industry is like, that will help.
Absolutely. And in terms of mentorship, what do you think the best approaches are within cyber?
Best approaches in mentorship. What do you mean by that? Do you mean if somebody wants to find a mentor?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, finding somebody to act as a mentor, or for people looking for a mentor, what do you think the best approaches for, professionals looking to start out and develop their careers?
I'd probably say LinkedIn is a really good platform right now. There are a lot of people posting, and I mean, I learned about women in retail network and women in tech network through LinkedIn, through people resharing their posts and saying, we're looking for global ambassadors, we're looking for mentors. So actually actively going on LinkedIn or social media to identify different groups, or Facebook is a really popular platform now as well. And then on the ground, as I say, I'm such an advocate for networking. London, for example, there's just so much in this space in terms of you could go to a technology event or a cyber social run by a couple of the big organizations, meet people, and you could possibly find a mentor that way. And I think actually in person is nicer because you get a flavor for the person and you think, well, actually, I like their story, I like their background. I want them to help me have a career and get in touch with them after. So both digital and in person, I think, is a good route.
I think something that sort of really stood out to me there on that, Alexandra, is the fact that, earlier in your career, perhaps you have mentors from different areas. So one thing I want to communicate to the audience is you don't necessarily need a mentor from the cybersecurity remit. You can look to wider tech, DevOps, for instance, or even different sectors, of course.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's such a good point to make. Because I've collaborated with technical and non-technical teams, I've learned so much along the way. And it's not that I was looking to understand vulnerabilities or networks or protocols, but it just so happened because I was working with these teams, they would be offloading their information to me, and without them knowing, really acting as a mentor and guiding me to understand more about the industry. So it can be inadvertently, you're not even looking for it, but you're gaining knowledge constantly. And I mean, cybersecurity, you're working with such intelligent people. I'm always taken back by just how smart we are as professionals, and we live for it. And it's the same when you talk to others. This is our bread and butter. It's our careers. We want to help. We want to do better. So it's fantastic.
What's your thoughts on apprenticeships? In terms of how do you think apprenticeships differ from maybe traditional entry paths? What are the benefits of that, I guess, to both the individuals and the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I've been looking into apprenticeships. It was recently Global Apprenticeship Week, I think last week or the week before, and the government's introduced more funding for it. I think it's great in terms of practical gaining practical skills and having hands-on experience. I guess if you were just navigating from university straight to a graduate role, you don't have that internship or the in-between to actually work out, is this the career that I want? And I guess the apprenticeship offers that to you if you decide you wanted to go in possibly through a threat intelligence route, but actually you don't like the strategic side of things, and you're not really interested in writing reports and delivering presentations. You'd rather go into more of a technical role and incident response. So I think the apprenticeship is that in between where you could actually work out which pathway you specifically want to go down. And again, at no detriment to yourself, because you're not really losing anything, maybe a little bit of time, but you're not losing anything else. You're constantly gaining understanding.
And on that, I read a report earlier today, actually, from the UK government. It was one that came out late last year, but it suggested that the job market since 2022 through to the end of 2024 have actually seen a 33% reduction in job postings. Jay and myself see that. Internal teams have actually been tightening the belt, reducing the workload and sometimes the workforce in favour of outsourcing. But although we've seen a reduction in the job postings, there's still an increased need. And on the topic of apprenticeships, within that study, it highlighted that there have been funding put in place for 533 apprenticeships across the UK in 2024. That was a 22% increase from the year before. So it is really, really encouraging to hear that there's going to be further investment. And to organisations out there that perhaps see the apprenticeship scheme as a untraditional route, especially within tech, it's probably one that you've not thought about. You can use the platform today to speak to them directly. What keywords of advice would you give hiring managers and teams and organisations in terms of leveraging apprenticeships?
I think working out are apprenticeships right for you as an organisation? Can you offer them out first of all? And definitely going back to offering that hands-on experience to younger generations is really important. I delivered a presentation before Christmas to universities. I went back to my old university, Bar Spa, where I originally studied criminology at my bachelor's level. And I was talking to the students there, and what they said to me after, the little bit of feedback, can we come and shadow you? Can you offer us a day in the life? Because they want to understand, well, how does this role actually fit in with who I am as a human being? So it's not just about the knowledge you're gaining, but can I do this and will I be excited by it? So definitely the apprenticeship will offer that. In theory, it will give you that kind of day in the life hands-on experience, and you can take people with you. And I think also with the apprenticeships, it will allow us as experts to upskill ourselves as well.
Yeah, and staying on people sort of starting out in the industry, what is it that you think maybe other skills and experiences that people overlook? What else should people be prioritizing earlier on in their careers, do you think?
I think for me, when I was just starting out, because I didn't know too much about cybersecurity before I was applying for roles, I was just learning the basics. So the foundation, what is cybersecurity, some of the frameworks, and just learning, just having a little bit more insight into the industry so I could apply that to the interview process, whether or not you're going through the apprenticeship route or a graduate program or just an entry level role, there probably still will be an interview process of some sort. So just having an understanding of the industry and making sure that in the beginning, this is something that you're interested in, even if you're not certain on the specific pathway. I was always trying to upskill. I was always trying to take a couple of courses online, and I'm not saying that you definitely have to do that, but just yeah, just starting and just learning a little bit more in the beginning, I guess.
Appreciate you sharing there, Alexandra. And obviously, I've noticed that you were most recently nominated for one of the most inspired women in cybersecurity for 2025. So, congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Not that it was an oversight, but obviously I got the email through and it's quite a feeling. Again, it goes back to kind of responsibility in a way. But as I always say, I'm so grateful to be a part of the industry of cybersecurity. And one of the stories that I always talk about is I faced so much rejection in the beginning because I didn't have the background. I was constantly going to interviews and I just wasn't, no company would take me on. And they'd say to me, do you think this is the right career for you? And they'd say, you need to go away and learn more about this. And I took the feedback and I went away and I upskilled. So that's why I think it's really important to take that rejection if you are feeling a little bit uncertain, to just keep pushing and have that self-belief. So to have received, to be shortlisted for the most inspiring cyber, it's rewarding. It definitely is. I don't like to self-indulge too much, but I've really come a long way in 4 years and I've put the work in. And yeah, this is hopefully where I see myself for life.
Well, look, myself and Jay commend you for your contributions. You're inspiring to women enter the industry, not just cybersecurity, but the STEM wider space in that respect. And that brings me on to my next question. I think you're in a great position to answer that. Personal brand and self-development. When it comes to the best approach and practices in terms of that personal branding within cybersecurity, for instance, I know you spoke at TEDx, for instance. What are the most important things to ensure that branding's right from the first instance, and of course ensuring that it's sustainable as you move forward?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, personal brand, I always say it's lifelong. It's your personal brand is, we could say that it starts when you're born and then you're constantly evolving as a person as you go on. In cybersecurity, I think personal brand for me is a little bit different and maybe niche because I have multiple skill sets. So I never just see myself as a threat intelligence lead or a cybersecurity expert. I love the public speaking. So trying to hone in on that as part of my personal brand. I am kind of an advisor. You can come to me and ask me questions, and then I'd be able to offer solutions and help you out. But then off the back of that, I love the networking aspect. I love the self-development coaching. I love helping people. And I've really tried to cultivate that through my personal brand. I want people to see what I see, and that you can have any life that you want. You can have any career. It will be very, very hard. And some days are not as great as others. There are challenges that you have to overcome, but ultimately you can do anything. And that is my personal brand now. But there were definitely stepping stones, and it didn't all just come one day. I think in the last 12 to 18 months, I think it's working out who I am. And I'm a big advocate for that as well in personal branding. Who are you as a person? What are your values? What's your mission? What do you bring to the table? If that's not a lot at the beginning, it's fine. You can, as I say, you're evolving as a person constantly. So Alex today isn't going to be Alex in next year, or Alex in 5 years' time. She's going to be thinking about big goals and big dreams. But today, yeah, it's just keep going with the personal brand, but just keep putting yourself out there and just keep talking to people and getting creative and having ideas. Because some of my biggest collaborations and some of my big ideas have come from talking to others and understanding gaps in the industry.
And do you feel the right time for individuals to start is early in their career, as they're reaching maturity perhaps, or as they're looking to move into leadership positions, or all of the above?
I'd say all of the above. But I would say definitely starting out earlier on, for example, during university, if you're studying or whatever you're really studying, for me, I always say try and optimize. Try putting out a couple of posts online. So going back to kind of LinkedIn is a really great platform for sharing content. Whatever you're studying, or if you're doing extracurricular activities, or if you're going to conferences, even if you're not talking, you've just gone for a couple of days, put that out and put a little bit of content and see how it resonates with the audience, because that's building your personal brand. Somebody will come along and say, oh, that's interesting. So and so's been to the conference. I might go next time because it looks great. And you just never know who you're informing and who you're tapping into. So I definitely say starting at the beginning. I wish I had. I wish I had become more familiar with personal brand when I was 21, and I didn't. I never posted on LinkedIn. I never really used social media. I didn't go to any networking events before I came to London. Everything has been so new to me in the last 2.5 years since I moved here. So I sometimes feel as I've had to kind of give myself a bit of a kick and say, go on, you've got to do it now, because I didn't, earlier on. So I definitely say if you can, start small, maybe go to 1 or 2 networking events, do things that interest you, put a couple of posts out, but don't get overwhelmed and don't think I've got to tell people everything about me and I've got to build this fantastic personal brand and I've got to do everything today, because you don't. It's like I say, it's lifelong. You're constantly evolving, but it's good to start earlier. But going on to the leadership, one of the interesting trends that we've seen, and I think this last year and this year, so there are some videos on TikTok which I've come across, and it's kind of behind the scenes, and it's relating to talk shows. They'll walk down a hallway and there'll be people cheering them on, and they'll be lip syncing to music. There's one video I saw on LinkedIn of employees doing the same thing. So they're actually, employees are walking down the hallway and people are cheering them on, and there's a little bit of a behind the scenes element. And I think people want to see more of that, maybe with CISOs and leadership and companies. We can't obviously show everything, definitely from a cybersecurity point of view. We can't be showing the ins and outs of offices, or maybe outside the building. I'm not sure how we'd be able to do it, but just definitely giving a little bit more insight into who we are. We're not just our titles, we're not just experts, we're not just analysts, but we're human beings. We're funny, we have a good time, and I think it's just that human to human element which we're missing sometimes. So maybe that is something as well.
No, I certainly agree with you on that. And I know it's a conversation Jay has with many security leaders and professionals. Now, I know we covered it briefly earlier, but how important is practical experience and specializations when it comes to your own self-development?
Self-development. I definitely think practical experience is important. For me, I gained my practical experience as soon as I was within the industry, having my first role in threat intelligence. And I've done pretty much everything. I mean, with threat intelligence, you're doing kind of business as usual operations, you're looking at alerts, you're ticketing, and then you're presenting out the information to clients. So I definitely think having that hands-on within a team setting, learning from other people, working with clients is really important. You don't necessarily have to, but I feel communicating with them, understanding the business, understanding how they operate, how they talk to each other, internal teams, and then from a consulting point of view, and I've worked as an MSP before, and externally, teams coming together. So yeah, I think the hands-on experience is invaluable. You definitely need it. And definitely in terms of your self-development as a person as well. And like I say, 4 years, and I've just done everything in threat intelligence, and I've loved it.
And from your perspective, how competitive is the cybersecurity industry?
I think I want to say it is competitive, but I think there's room for everyone. I don't know whether I'm obviously a little bit biased because I'm not sure, but yeah, I think there's room for everyone in cybersecurity. I think it can be competitive when you're applying for roles and you're looking at job specifications and it's telling you you need between 5 or 10 years of experience in order to do this role, and you need these types of certifications and you need these core skills and competencies that can possibly, if I was looking back at myself when I was first trying to get a role, I probably think I probably feel quite overwhelmed, and I probably think, yes, the industry is quite competitive. And again, when I was going for interviews, there were half a dozen different people applying at the same time as me. But going back to having a little bit of self-belief and upskilling right from the beginning, learning more about the industry, about the different roles, can help you have an edge, I would say. But also, I coach people in the past, and they're pivoting. They're coming from international relations background, and then they're coming into cybersecurity, and we've actually worked out their transferable skills: time management, risk management, public speaking, presenting, and we positioned them in a way so that we remove the scarcity, so they feel as though, well, actually, I deserve a place here, and if I go to an interview, I know what I'm going to say, and I might not have everything that they want on the job specification, but I'm eager and I'm willing and I'm passionate. And I think also having that as part of your skill set can again give you that edge. But I think there's definitely a place for everyone, and there's a skills gap anyway in cybersecurity. We want more people to come and work with us. So
Definitely, and Jay and myself obviously head up recruitment for secure recruitment, and we've seen a shift in the market over the last 24 months in terms of individuals going out freelance, self-employed, or even working as fractional service providers. That's from CISOs through to SMEs, for instance, as well as revenue-generating individuals. That's certainly an area that we've seen an increase in the last sort of 6 to 12 months. But for those that are listening today, some practical insight would be amazing from you, especially those that are perhaps got more of a corporate background and are considering going out freelance on their own. It's a tremendously exciting journey and, of course, quite daunting and full of challenges. So can you first talk us through the benefits and, of course, the challenges and uncertainties attached to that? And then share with us, a starting point. Why would individuals actually take that leap?
yeah, so for me, now going into the freelance round, definitely daunting. Some days I wake up and think, what the hell am I doing? Really? I sit there and I'm not quite sure, because I have a very corporate background. That's how I entered the industry. I've loved the corporate experience, honestly. For me, one thing I'd recommend right off the bat: don't get too disheartened. If you do start out in corporate and you decide to go into freelance later on, I've seen people do both. They start freelance, end up in corporate, and then go to freelance. So don't get too disheartened, because I wouldn't have been able to go freelance, if I'm honest, if I hadn't have had that experience and knowledge and worked with the teams, worked with the clients to actually figure out, well, I love the public speaking, I love presenting. I wouldn't have known that had I have gone freelance straight away. The benefits for me, I'm very free spirited in terms of, I like to work on passion projects. I have multiple different skills. As I say, I'm not just a threat intelligence lead or a cybersecurity expert. I am a public speaker, a self-development coach. I want to help a lot of different people, whether that's an organization, a business, or an individual. So I just felt it was time, really. It was time for me to explore what's next in my path. And that wasn't, like I say, that's not negating corporate, because I think it's absolutely fantastic to start there. And I've met so many amazing people along the way, and I've worked on extraordinary projects, and I've faced a lot of challenges, and it's helped me grow as an individual, as the person I am now. So I'd say definitely, if you're to start out, don't be too disheartened if it is corporate, because it's a great place to begin, as I say. And what else would I recommend? I think for me, like I say, the last 12 months, it was really figuring out, who am I as a person? What projects would I want to work on? If I were to go freelance, who would I want to work with as organizations or individuals? And I would say try different things. So for me, I do coaching, but then I also still do a little bit of the consultancy advisory. I still speak to businesses, and then I go and do the public speaking at conferences, and I have a few coming up where I'll be speaking to a room full of people about cybersecurity strategy, and I'm going to Scotland to do that. So it's, when you go freelance, don't feel that you have to niche down and just have the one pipeline. You can have multiple different projects around you. And I think that's what interested me when I was thinking about going it alone. I wanted to figure out a way I can utilize all of my skills and do the projects that I really want to do and not lose out, really.
And In terms of, I mean, look, we've probably discussed already that the most pivotal decision you've made in your career was moving from corporate to freelance. Are there any other catalyst moments that you would put as defining moments in your career?
Gosh, maybe moving to London, actually, because I'm from a small town. I'm originally from Worcester, which is in the West Midlands, and I studied at Bar Spa, which again is countryside, quite small. And I moved to Gloucester to study my master's, and I lived in Cheltenham for a little bit, and then obviously moved to London in the summer of 2022, and everything was just so new. It's a huge city. I didn't know anybody. I moved for work, which was great because I had my colleagues and I had people I could talk to. But ultimately, I was solo. I was on my own. I didn't really have anybody here, so I had to kind of come out of my introverted shell and go networking just to meet people and have conversations and just understand a bit more about life. And if I look back to when I first moved, not that I don't recognize Alex 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, but yeah, I mean, it's a shell of my former self now. Obviously this is my home and I hope to be here for many more years, and I've had the best times, some of the most challenging times, but that's part of life really. So yeah.
Yeah, listen, and that's obvious to see, but look, straight off the top of the diving board is often the best way to go, Alexandra, for sure. And look, let's talk a little bit about maybe sort of failures and successes. We all know, that we learn much more from failure, and the lessons we learn from that outweigh those that we learn from success. And it builds character, and often gives people a lot more resilience in terms of their thinking and their leadership abilities. What's your definition of success in business? What are some of the main ingredients that you think people need to be successful?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I think everybody defines success differently. Some may say that success is defined in monetary value. For me, it's about impact. And I definitely think success is, as I say, life of service, helping as many people as possible. Through the coaching, for example, if I've managed to get somebody feeling confident, changing mindset, getting them ready for a fruitful career, I've been successful in what I want to do. If I've managed to speak to a room full of people and they've taken something away in the realm of cybersecurity, that's success to me. I've made an impact. So it's definitely defined differently to people, but for me, it's about impact. Really, that's the biggest thing.
What about for yourself, Jay?
Well, absolutely. We've had this conversation, Warren, and I think we've talked about certainly the community and where we've been in the last sort of 18 months. And I think we've absolutely redefined what success looks like, Alexandra, 100%. And I think that only comes when you see, the sort of the impact that you're making. So I think absolutely impact in the community engagement, the community enablement, without a doubt. I couldn't agree more. I might have disagreed with you on that a few years ago, but I would say that 100% we couldn't agree more. And leading on from that, do you think failure is necessary for success in business? And can you maybe give us an example of where you've personally turned failure into a success?
Yeah, no, I have one example which I never talk about, and I think it's because maybe not that there's shame, and I think failure, it can feel quite guilty to look at failure because it's gut-wrenching, some of the experiences that people have, but I'm turning them into successes. What I used to deem one of my biggest failures was when I was studying my bachelor's, I didn't receive the grade that I wanted when I came out of my degree, and I felt like I'd wasted 3 years. So then I had to do a master's because I didn't know what role I wanted to go in. I didn't know what career I wanted to have. So I turned that into a success because when I went on to do my master's, I learned about cyber a little bit, and then that's taken me on to the career I have now. But for a long time, I never really spoke about it, and because I felt quite a lot of guilt and shame surrounding that in terms of not working hard enough, and then leading on to a career in cyber, feeling that I had to work hard there as well. So yeah, failure is different for everybody, but for me, it's definitely just taking a moment to reflect on it. Is this your biggest failure? How can you turn it into a success? And yeah.
I think the word, it's an interesting word, isn't it? It's a word that just, there's connotations to the word, but I think it's all lessons. It's all lessons, and it shapes us. 100%. You know, it shapes us. That's my thoughts for sure.
Well, definitely, because, if I hadn't done poorly in my eyes, and that's why I don't talk about it enough, because everybody deems failure differently. So to somebody else, it might not be, but to me it was. So yeah, it's a difficult conversation to have, but just flipping the switch, just turning it into a success story. Well, what did you do after that, and what was your trajectory like? And for me, as I say, if I hadn't have failed in that area, I wouldn't have taken my master's. I wouldn't have learned a little bit about cyber, and I wouldn't be in the industry. I don't think so. It was meant to happen that way, and
Absolutely. Yeah, it was meant to be. No, absolutely, for sure.
And you mentioned obviously the importance of community. Jay and myself are huge advocates for community enablement, as well as obviously community engagement. We recognise as an organisation and as individuals that community building, collaboration, information, knowledge sharing, they're all vital. It's really incredibly important. And I know you've obviously played a tremendous role in developing and advancing communities here in the UK. So we do commend you for that. But I know we've covered obviously mentorship and the key aspects of collaboration. So I'm not going to sort of recover that ground again, but I'm curious to gain your perspective in terms of how cyber communities can stay relevant, especially with technologies evolving, of course, regulations coming in.
yeah, so I mean, how they can stay relevant, I think definitely through more collaboration for the cyber communities. I am working on a little project now where I'm trying to spotlight emerging talent, and I'm trying to open up the floor a little bit more to younger generations coming into the industry. So I think cyber communities now, the way that they can stay relevant is more collaboration and just opening up the floor. So often I go to, say, conferences or I go to workshops and I don't really see any young people there. And I think relevancy over the next few years will be introducing Gen Z, Gen Alpha, giving them a seat at the table, looking at technology, how that's expanding industry trends, and just figuring out a way that we can all actively come together as part of a community more so, not necessarily siloing each other, as I do feel that we have been a little bit, and yeah, just coming together more, I think definitely will help with the relevancy part.
Most definitely, and something myself and Jay talk about quite often is that the key to this is collaboration, not competition. It's cybersecurity certainly. It's a phrase that's overused, but it's certainly relevant. Cybersecurity is a team sport, and we utilise the community, as well as the podcast to reach and make the widest impact. And I understand you've most recently launched your own "Take a Chance on You" podcast. Could you tell us a little bit about that and the motivation behind that, Alexandra?
Yeah, the idea came a year ago, so it's been a long time coming, but so when I used to go to networking events, obviously I used to speak to people just randomly, and it wouldn't necessarily be about cybersecurity. I'd be going to a fashion event or an e-commerce event or just a meetup coffee, something unrelated to what I'm doing. But the idea is I just wanted to talk to people and see what challenges they're facing in life. And they come back to me, and it would be young people more so than older people at the time. And they'd be saying, I don't know how to network. I haven't got the right resources. I don't know what career I want. I've got low self-esteem, low confidence. And I just remember these people over time. So that was happening last year. Take a Chance on You is me wanting to offer out a platform to up and coming talent. I really want emerging individuals to come to the table, not wait until they feel like they have been successful to tell their story. I want them to tell it now because it's so important at the beginning. And we've mentioned that throughout. Telling people, it's all about inspiration, telling people what you've been up to at university if you're studying, or just about to enter the workforce, if you're building your own startup, if you're going through entrepreneurship, freelance, whatever it is you're doing, there'll be somebody listening who is one or two steps behind you or possibly a step in front of you, and can use the advice and use the resources that you're talking about to help inform their own journey. So I think it's removing the status quo and not waiting, like I say, till you're 20, 30 years into the industry. And okay, now you're going to tell people how you got there. Tell them right at the beginning, because everybody has a story to tell and they don't realize it. And when I've been interviewing guests, this is the first time they've ever been on a podcast. Some of them want to go on to do more public speaking, which I think is just absolutely fantastic. They love the experience so much, and they've just found value in it. They've been a little bit nervous at the beginning, but by the end, they've come away, they've had 30 minutes to reflect on themselves, and it just changes. It just allows you to be more optimistic and just changes your outlook on life, really. And I don't think social media is helping as much as we think. Everybody's looking at the big wins, but not focusing on themselves enough. Just realizing that, like I say, you can decide whatever you want to do, and it's your life.
What advice would you give to those that are considering starting their own podcast and doing more speaking?
I'd probably say work with somebody, don't do it solo, because I'm finding it very hard. But I would definitely say, so for me with the podcast, I tried to do something different. I didn't want to do what was already being done on a lot of podcasts now. So maybe trying to work out a niche or a gap that you want to fill would be a really good starting point. And I think to me, it's been it's been a great upskilling moment, because I didn't know how to do a podcast, and there's so much to it, from recording the sessions, finding the guests, editing out the content, putting out the content. There's so many different levels to podcasting. It's not just sitting in front of a screen or in person talking to somebody across the room. There's a lot behind the scenes. So definitely I would say take your time. I've taken mine. I didn't rush into it. It took me a year to really hone in on who would I want to come on, what would the name be, just the cover art, the graphics, the marketing, all of the different components to it. But definitely figure out a niche. Just my last thing. I would say there are thousands of podcasts out there now. So if you can tap into something that hasn't been explored before, or there's a gap, that's great.
I certainly agree with you. And we launched a podcast, I think it was 4 months ago today, and we've actually almost reached, I think it's 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. So thank you to the audience, and of course our guests, much similar to yourself, that have joined us in the past. And in terms of the view rate, we're almost at 100,000 views. And so we've certainly seen support from the community, which is a really important factor. What's your perspective on that, Jay?
Yeah, I think so, Alexandra. And I think, look, it is interesting to hear, because people do think podcasts are quite straightforward things, and far from it. But no, I mean, listening to you today and listening to the whole ethos behind what you're trying to achieve, I've absolutely no doubt that you'll be a tremendous success with it. And I think it's been really fascinating listening to your journey, your insights, and some of the thinking behind your decisions. I'm sure our audience will get a lot from it. What does the future hold for you then, apart from the podcast, of course? What else does the future hold for you?
I am working on one exciting project, which unfortunately I can't talk about, but it will be coming out at the end of the year, fingers crossed. That is kind of, for me, go back to the personal brand, it's all about the trajectory. So I did the TEDx and I focused on community because I experienced it all around me. The podcast, the future for me really is just talking more to people, just getting out there, getting out and about, helping others to see why I see the value in themselves as well as businesses. Doing more in the cybersecurity space, building a community, but then also collaborating with other communities will be really important for me this year. And also, I don't know whether you've thought about this as well, but with the podcast, and I guess just generally thinking about community, getting people together in person. So for me, I'd love to do live events where you just shoot fire questions and answers and have panel discussions and actually get people in a room, because that's where, again, the creativity just starts flowing and ideas. And so the future is digital, but also in real life.
Well, that's brilliant. And myself and Jay, as well as the community, we've actually been invited to partner with a number of events here in the UK, and not just in the north, but also down in London. So when we're actually working on those events and those expeditions, we'll certainly invite you to be part of the panels in live.
Yeah, and the last thing is, obviously you're doing a fantastic job as well, and I'm so happy that we connected. I love the podcast, and yeah, definitely you have the same vision in terms of community as well. And the more people I speak to, people want to be involved. They want to feel like they have somewhere to go and they have people to talk to, and they can mix with like-minded individuals outside of, say, their family and friends and their regular circle. Community is a little bit different. It's about just opening up the floor to everybody, and you're all invited, and you've got a story, you've got great ideas to share, so let's just make it happen.
Yeah, and I think this industry drags you in, doesn't it? If you're not involved in it, I don't think people really get it, and I don't think they understand the importance of it. But, you know, it is an industry, I think, that drags you in from a passion, from a belief, from a support, from an all-consuming perspective. And I think you're right, and that's why probably community within cyber is maybe even more intense, I think, and important. I think people, really understand that this is a vitally important sector. So for any of our listeners who want to stay connected with you, obviously after the episode, where else can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so I have my website, which you can go and visit and can book time with me. If you want to, the podcast, you can go and have a listen to the Take a Chance on You. By the time that this episode goes, then the podcast is up and running, so you can go and have a listen. If you want to get involved and come on and have your say and tell your story, I'm more than happy to listen to you. And then obviously I'm in London, so come and say hello and drop me a message, and I'd love to have a coffee and speak to people. And yeah.
So listen, we'd like to thank you, Alexandra. I'm sure the community and all our listeners will have found a huge amount of value in today's session, listening to your perspectives and your journey. To continue the discussion for more sustained engagement, we obviously invite you to join the Secure Cyber Connect community, where we offer a range of collaborative solutions for both technology and security professionals at no cost. These include expansive community access, mutual mentoring programs, online networking sessions, and a range of exclusive interviews such as this, panel discussions and masterclasses coming later in 2025. To learn more and gain access to the community in any of our initiatives, please visit secure-recruitment.com/cyber-connect/. Thank you very much. If you're struggling with technological, cultural, or talent acquisition challenges, please reach out to the Secure Cyber Connect team, where we offer advice and guidance and are here to help.